Hi everyone and welcome to the video. We decided to interview Claude Wagner, a Luxembourgish entrepreneur, about his venture Urban Move.
Hello, and so I'll be talking about the background of the person who we interviewed for this project. So we interviewed Claude Wagner, who is a recognized serial entrepreneur in Luxembourg, winning the EY Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2016, which was the last entrepreneur award awarded since COVID struck the one last year. And he won this award for the other ventures that he undertook before, so leading up to 2016. But the one that we're looking at is the one that he launched in January 2020 called Urban Move. So more on the background of Claude Wagner. So he's worked for about 30 to 40 years in the construction industry, where he worked his way up to owning his own distribution firm of construction material. But now he's set to start his own path in the retail businesses in the sports industry. And his last venture, so the one that we'll be looking at, is called, as I mentioned, Urban Move, where the startup looks at distributing electric mobility vehicles or modes of transportation. You can't really call them vehicles, to the market through a small retail shop located in Kirchberg, Luxembourg. So he launched this in 2020, but unfortunately he ran into some difficulties right away because 2 months after he opened the shop, the pandemic closed many of the shops and forced them to keep their doors shut for several months. So just get an overview, which might clarify some of the things about the startup. The products that the shop or the startup wants to distribute are on the screen. It's Segway, it's scooters, it's gyro wheels. It's also electric bikes. So everything that you can think of as electric mobility solutions, this startup or this retail shop that he's trying to launch is trying to get this to the customers.
Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and talk about the opportunity identification phase of the interview. So the entrepreneur identified the business opportunity through his own self-assessment of the market, since he has lived his whole life in Luxembourg and especially from being an athlete. He thought that the demand for electronic mobility solutions would be a high one. The idea came to him when he found out about the rapid rise of the worldwide use of electronic scooters, with, for example, the development of Lime scooters around the world. He also thought about combining this new worldwide trend of increasing electronic scooter demand with the increasing calls by the Luxembourg government urging the public to use more green transport that run on renewable energy and not on harmful fossil fuels. An example given to us by the entrepreneur is that the local government of Luxembourg is offering to aid bicycle buyers by paying 50% of the price of bicycles up to a limit of up to 600 euros. As you can see, the government is really encouraging this sort of business activity, and therefore the entrepreneur saw it as an activity for him to exploit it and presented an opportunity for him to exploit. In addition to, the entrepreneur already had another sports-only retail shop where he sells other sorts of sports tools to the public. Through this other sports shop, he realized that the people's demands for scooters have increased dramatically over the past couple of years. All of these past points considered together, in addition to his own personal problems that he had from his experience from being a cyclist and an athlete in Luxembourg, he decided to open a specialized venture for professional electronic mobility solutions that are not yet available to the athletic community of Luxembourg, whom he is part of. Moving forward to how risky this opportunity is, he concluded that the opportunity is quite risky as retailing for electronic mobility solutions was not yet on offer before him in Luxembourg. In addition to this, rent in Luxembourg of the retail space is of a very high cost as there is limited land and the leasing contracts there bind you to the property on a long-term basis. For example, with the entrepreneur, he is said to be bound for the property for 8 years from the binding date. These factors taken into consideration, and we can tell that the opportunity is a risky one and has no guarantee of success, but is targeting a current gap in the market and therefore has, at least at the bare minimum, a chance of success. With regards to how big the opportunity is, right now the market for electronic mobility solutions is quite small, and especially in Luxembourg, as a high proportion of the inhabitants own cars. More specifically, 661 per 1,000 of the inhabitants own cars. However, e-mobility is a market with huge potential, as said by the entrepreneur, and this is as true as ever in Luxembourg, as we have seen from the governmental encouragements. It is currently, however, an untapped market in Luxembourg, and a market whose potential growth is still unknown, and therefore represents an opportunity and could have a big chance of success for the entrepreneur.
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk about why did the entrepreneur go for this idea. So basically, the entrepreneur decided to take the risk and launch the business, as he thought that it would be imperative for him to be the first person to open a shop retailing scooters and other e-mobility modes of transport. The entrepreneur also thought that this could complement his other ventures. He also has sports-only retail shops, and he could attract other clientele to his other shops. And furthermore, the entrepreneur is also someone who has undertook many ventures in the past and is very impulsive with his ideas. So you could say he just went for it. So also, how did the entrepreneur decide why to open this shop? So what information he looked at, the people he consulted to, and etc. So basically, the entrepreneur stated that he used his own similar intuition and experience in the retail business with his other ventures. He is also a proactive person himself, so he saw that there was a gap in the market for people who wanted to find other solutions to move around in Luxembourg. And finally, he consulted friends of his who work in large corporations whose employees had to make the daily trip into work, and asked them what kind of mobility solutions would help and bring value to potential customers.
So, regarding the entrepreneurial process, how did the entrepreneur develop the business? Mr. Wagner looked at locations for retail locations to rent. He looked at different suppliers, and he looked at different customers that would be interested in electric mobility in Luxembourg. He did this by validating whether the customers would actually switch to electric mobiles, and also comparing the use of cars and the use of biking within the city. As was mentioned, Luxembourg is not really a biker city, so he really had to take that into account in order to provide these bikes. Did Mr. Wagner partner up with other people? No, he didn't. He decided to do the bootstrapping method, and he looked at, so basically he used his own experience with electric mobiles in order to start this business. He himself, he cycles a lot, and so he knows a lot about the field, and he used his own expertise as guidance to what the market could want in Luxembourg. So he wanted to solve a problem independently. Additionally, the project did not require external financing. He used his own bootstrapping method, and the benefits of which include full ownership, greater control, and limited debt. With this, he used little of his own capital to start this venture. He had to buy the initial stock himself and sign the lease agreement and hire employees. The growth of the business was made by the revenue produced by the business and not from the outside. And whether the venture grew quickly, it didn't grow quickly because of COVID, and because of quarantine, people were not able to go to the shops. And as soon as shops opened in January 2020, they closed again after 2 months. And so he explained to us that customers were not able to familiarize themselves with the electric scooter, the new product, and to that extent, he had trouble selling these premium options to customers. And after COVID, however, so at this moment itself, the situation is improving and shops are opening, and because of environmental concerns, people are willing to switch to electronic mobility.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about the measuring success and what we found out from the actual interview when talking to the entrepreneur. So the first question we asked him if he considered this venture to be a success, and he unfortunately said no, because at the time when he launched it in January 2020, he had it open for 2 months, the shop, and he told us that COVID hit 2 months later, and he had to close his shops for several months because of the COVID restrictions and that the government were trying to limit gathering of people. So that was the reason why it couldn't be considered a success yet. And then by what criteria? Well, that's quite obvious. And when you have a retail shop, you can easily see through the sales. The sales were disappointing so far because people were prohibited from going to the shops, and also this momentum that shops get when they open a shop, when they open up to the public. This wasn't at all the case for this venture and this idea of selling electric mobility solutions. There's also a low. So the customers, the consumers in Luxembourg also did not implement electric mobility as fast as the entrepreneur had hoped. That was currently occurring in other major cities. So you have a lot of the Scandinavian countries that are currently implementing a lot of electric solutions, and that the consumers are actually really interested in. But in Luxembourg, there is a very high income. So the entrepreneur thought that this income could be spent on electric mobility. However, because the houses are so far away from each other, from the work and from the city in Luxembourg, people use the cars a lot. So there's a lot of cars, and people haven't yet made that transition to electric mobility. Also, there wasn't enough customer awareness because the entrepreneur did not invest in marketing because of the COVID pandemic. He said that he had plans to market this new venture, but because the shops were closed, he thought that it wouldn't be worth it, and that this was something that definitely affected the success of the venture as it is now. And then, was there any trade-off that the entrepreneur gave if he gave up any other important things by investing his time in this venture? Well, of course, the entrepreneur said that he's working on so many other projects and ventures because he's a serial entrepreneur. He had to give up his time working on those and spending it on this venture. So not only did he have to also spend time, but he also had to spend money because he had to buy the initial stock and also enter into contracts with the actual location, the lease of the shop. And then looking at the personal assessment that we formulated from the interview and from the actual venture itself, do we agree with how the entrepreneur developed the business? Well, we agree that the entrepreneur used his own financial resources to launch the business, as this allows him to keep 100% of the ownership of the business, and instead of actually selling, trying to find financing by selling parts of or percentages of the company or getting loans, that's just an incumbent thing to deal with later. So not only have you lost part of the business, or you have to pay back a loan with interest, if you use your own financial resources, you can keep 100% of the ownership, and you're more flexible with what you do. However, we don't quite agree with how he launched the business. So we think that there was kind of a lack of concrete market research that was done on the idea before actually opening the shop. And so when you follow a lean startup style, which is kind of what the entrepreneur did, he launched it in a really short amount of time. However, he didn't actually test his hypothesis with the customers. He used more his own intuition and personal assessment of the market. So what could the entrepreneur have done differently? So we think that obviously he could have done more market research, but he could have also, by getting this market research, he could have created an MVP, a minimum viable product that tests his market hypothesis before actually opening the shop. However, he opened the shop and then tested the market research, and then he made tweaks to the actual shop to kind of cater the customer's needs. However, obviously, all of this was kind of hindered by the COVID pandemic. And then, what other areas of the project could be improved? So, as we said again, better market research. We also think better marketing that has to take place now. Obviously, we do know that the company, the startup, was greatly affected by COVID because it's a shop, and retailing was greatly affected by COVID, not only because it closed shops but also accelerated online sales. So this is something that we think that he should take into account now.
So overall, the entrepreneur in this case undertook the venture quite rapidly. He really wanted to bring this idea to the market as soon as possible and then make tweaks along the road to the business model. Throughout it, however, he realized it's not as easy as it seems, and proper market research and hypothesis testing should have been done. Basically, he tested his hypotheses after he had opened the shop, and the initial result did not receive much customer validation. Over time, however, and with the societal development post-COVID, he is still willing to pursue the market for e-mobility in Luxembourg because he believes it does have a lot of potential given the size of Luxembourg as such. And to this extent, I guess a key takeaway from this startup experience is the importance of market research and customer validation. It's important to really set out and test different hypotheses for customer validation, and from there to center one's business model accordingly. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed.